But anyway, so with the red pinstriping, the white hull, we added some kind of a teal blue coloring to the front surfaces, to a lot of the front surfaces, like the dorsal and the front of the pylons, the warp pylons, and the front of the engines actually had this same color. It's kind of a pseudo protection excuse for adding the blue color in there, I guess. I don't know. You ask about the Aztec, and I don't want to get away from that.
Yeah.
Also, Richard thought that the hull, in its then current condition, was very plain, and it didn't have that kind of intimate sense of scale that the big screen would need when this thing is projected at, like, I don't know, 100 feet across. So he said, let's put in some paneling. And he asked me to start designing the panels for the ship. And so I did that. I started with the saucer and created this, what's is called the Aztec paneling. And the idea was that these panels would interlock. They were designed, I can't do it obviously, but they were designed to sort of interlock all around the hull to give that surface skin kind of a greater tensile strength. I thought it would provide that. So that was my logic for that. And then I took that and we, went around the edge of the saucer and continued to add to the ship. I added sort of what kind of looks like a lightning bolt pattern up the warp nacelles, but they're interlocking panels just like the saucer. And I started working along the nacelles and the hull, but at this stage, so many years later, I don't remember how much of the ship I actually finished before it started to be painted. They brought in a painter to do that. Somebody that Richard, I think, had discovered could paint pearlescent paints, which in person, it just would knock your socks off because pearlescent paints have this iridescent quality that if you move around a panel, it changes color. So that gave it a really futuristic, in my opinion, kind of otherworld look, because whenever the ship would rotate, the paneling, the highlights would change, go from pink to yellow to blue to whatever. And it was amazing. Of course, it played hell with trying to separate that from the background. There was a lot of reflecting into that shiny paint, so that I think they ended up having to hand paint each negative to take the holes out of that were created by the reflections. So it was a real mess. And by the time they did Star Trek II, ILM corrected that situation.
Just going back to the pinstriping for a second, is that still what we see on the bridge here?
That's part of it, yeah. See, that originally there was some pinstriping on the original Enterprise down the back of the hull to the impulse engine, and I think along the engineering hull as well.
Yep.
And I wanted to carry that into the new Enterprise. I had, there were concerns. There were even more concerns when they did the Next Generation, but that's a different story. But there were concerns about, gee, what's this new ship going to look like, blah, blah, blah. And to kind of ease that transition, I wanted to put in some little subliminal notes that said, oh yeah, this is from the same fleet.
Cool. Now I've seen some Fast and Starfleet battleships, either miniatures or drawings, that have red striping kind of going on each side of the registry number around the hull. Was that part of your striping idea, or was that something else?
What I'm seeing on my screen here are very heavy-handed. They weren't anywhere near as thin as what we had on the Enterprise.
Okay.
We had thin pinstripes around the reaction control thrusters. We had. It seemed like there was pinstriping that went connected to phasers in some way. I don't remember now the whole arrangement, knowing that the saucer was a separate entity, and had to have a separation, an accounting for a separation. I added that bit of detail in there where there's a separation line on the dorsal.
Mhm.
And if the ship is going this way, that there's a triangular section on the front and back which actually blow away. They're like bolts that essentially hold the saucer in place, and then those would be blown away, and then the saucer could lift off of the dorsal.
And there was actually a storyboarding of that for the motion picture at the end. Is correct?
Yeah, there's a story with that.
Yeah.
So so to define that line, I think we left in the pinstriping around that specific area.
Mhm.
I don't remember, but once we got to the point of doing decals, we did a decal sheet. We did a lot of decals for the smaller models, which I think enhanced them immeasurably. Not stuff you can read, but stuff you can feel. It gives it more of a realistic quality, like the travel pod and Vulcan shuttle and things like that. But we had a decal sheet for the Enterprise, which had all these pinstripes on it. It also had just USS Enterprise dot Earth Federation something. I don't remember. It had a whole bunch of stuff, and that was to go above that separation line, because with the saucer by itself, people could look up at this landed saucer and read that this is the Enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
Trumbull saw that and he said, "Nah, let's stick it down here in the pennant." It's like, but people are not going to be able to read it. It's the pennant is where you have the logo and then those red stripes coming on both sides. It's like,
So in the original TOS, the phasers just sort of existed. No little slits, but whatever. And you specifically added phaser cannons, phaser bumps. What was the thought process behind adding the phaser weaponry?
Like a ball turret. It's awesome.
Yeah. The in the original series, the only phasers that I saw visible were at that lower navigational dome.
Yeah.
And one of my concerns was to cover the ship, in a total protective sphere. So I added the phaser bubbles, what I call phaser bubbles, to the saucer, back of the engineering hall, under the engineering hall, so that the ship had a total coverage, total defense system.
Was there ever discussion to add aft torpedoes to the Enterprise at some point? I know it wasn't in the script, but did you imagine a place where that could be?
No, I did that on the Next Generation.
Yeah. So looking at my little model, so there's this dome section, which is obviously much more prevalent on the Reliant. Yeah, Stuart's is better. So what is that? And I know it's the Impulse engine, but it's quite a stylistic piece. And the original TOS obviously is a bit more just, here's an Impulse engine. What was the design thought behind such a different piece?
Well, being so close to the Impulse engine, I thought that would be a great place for a sauna. No. If you look at the side diagram, there's all over the internet, there's a cutaway that I did of the Enterprise. And it shows the kind of the warp core going up through the engine room, as you saw in the film. But what I did was I extended it up through the dorsal all the way to the saucer, and not having any real grasp on how any of this power would be transferred or anything like that. My logic at the time was that that impulse engine would actually be continually recharged or boosted through the warp core. And within that housing, there is what I would call a deflector crystal that actually deflected the power from the warp core out into the main impulse engines. So that's called a deflector housing or cover. It made sense at the time. With Next Generation, it makes less sense, but that was my logic, was just to take the power from warp core, send it up through the saucer, and have it deflected into the impulse system.
Cool.
All right. So, final question, I guess. Are you completely 100% happy with the finished product? Or if you could travel back in time, as per Star Trek, you know, they always do that. Is there anything you would do differently, add or take away from the model?
For the Enterprise itself?
Yeah, for the refit.
I really can't think of anything. You know, I'm actually pretty happy with it, and apparently the fans are too. It seems to be the most popular Enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
If I had total control of the production, you know, if we were going to take that fantasy that far, I would have adhered more to the interior of the officers' lounge when Kirk and Spock are having their conversation, so that those windows that were intended for that space would actually be seen.
Mm-hmm.
Darren Doctorman has actually put together images that show what that would have looked like, and it really looks great. So I would change that. I would not make people try and believe that the rec room would fit in that saucer. I would design a rec room that in fact would. And I tried to give Hal Michelson, the production designer, several options that would actually fit in the Enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
And his reasoning to me was, well, people don't go to the show with slide rules in their hands, so it really doesn't matter. I want to give this thing some scope.
Have they met Star Trek fans? I'm just wondering.
Well,
So,
at that
no.
point,
Now, Hal Michelson was probably one of the 5 best production designers in the country, if not the world. But he did not quite get a fan's mind when it comes to science fiction. But as a production designer, there is nothing I can take away from that guy.
Yeah.
I just wish that he was more open to what we all knew, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would have changed the rec room.
cool.
I can't think of anything else, seriously. I was really pretty happy with the whole ship.
And that actually goes back to what you said a moment ago. I mean, the fan reaction to the ship has... I can't imagine it's what you necessarily expected. I mean, so many years later, it's beloved, and like you say, many people's favourite design. How, what do you take away from that? How do you feel about being the man who designed maybe the prettiest Enterprise?
It's really hard to get an honest answer from a fan if they know who you are. I love stepping into conversations without anybody recognizing me, and to actually try and get opinions, honest opinions, you know. I'm thinking of some other stuff, but anyway, I would like to know really what it is about the ship that makes it the fans' favorite, because I wouldn't mind doing it a second time, you know, because I don't know what it was that happened. You know, a lot of people say, well, it looks the most realistic. Okay, can you elaborate on that for me? You know, I don't know what that means. You know, if we could take it point by point, then you know, that would be great. But what I take away from it, yeah, I'm still very happy that I had so much to do with that and the other ships in Star Trek: The Motion Picture. You know, it's an honor, and that's what I take away with.
And what I'm hearing is that all fans of Trekyards watch this episode right now. Put in the comments below why you love the ship so much. Deconstruction. Andrew Probert's asking for an essay, guys. Go.
Fantastic, yeah. If they want to leave comments about why they love the ship as much as they do over the D and over most of the other Star Trek ships, I'm really hoping to read a lot of stuff, and even if it's a put down, well, I hate this because that's the most important word in a sentence, is the word because.
Mm-hmm.
you know, because if it's like, I hate it, it sucks, and you walk away, well, it's like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
But if it's like, I hate it because it doesn't do this, or it's this color, or this, you know, whatever, then that gives me something to go back with and say, okay, well, that didn't work for this guy. I'll see what I can do. So.
And that's where Trekyards shines, because when we do our ships, we always do what we like and what we dislike about each ship. So we kind of discuss that. So when we get to the full Legends episode on this ship, we'll be discussing those points ourselves. So
It's going to be a long one.
Well, there you have it, everyone. A behind-the-scenes look at probably the most loved Enterprise ever designed. We hope you enjoyed the show. And if you are one of the great people that contributed to our Indiegogo campaign and are now part of the exclusive Trekyards Declassified Facebook group, please go ask a question on our regular Q&A thread. And you can get your questions answered in the video form by Mr. Probert himself. All right, I would like to thank Andrew for joining us today.
You're welcome.
As always, it's great to have you on here. You're one of my favorite designers to talk to, and we look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So until next time, guys, give that like button a click. Please subscribe to the channel. And also don't forget about the public Facebook group, or please visit trekyards.com if you want to contribute to the show and donate. We now have a donate button to make that easy for you guys to help us out. So we will see you guys next week with a new show and a new ship. Bye, everybody.
See you.